My name's Linda Schatz. I'm from Abington, Massachusetts. I've been in the Boston area my whole life, grew up in Dover, and the first place my husband and I moved to was Holbrook, and then got our house built in Abington. And I've loved art all my life. I grew up having a wonderful elementary school art teacher, and that sort of spurred on my interest in art, and I've sort of just carried it through my whole life. I majored in art in middle school, high school, and then in college, sort of doing the big think, what do you want to really do with your life? And I said, well, I don't know what I can do with art, but I don't really have anything else I really want to major in. So I decided to major in studio art, and then I got a bachelor's degree, a BS degree they called it, in studio art. And then there was the big question of now what do I do? So my parents were gracious enough to allow me to go to Rhode Island School of Design. It was a one-year degree, so I have a master's in art and teaching. And then, so I also teach at Norwood Extended Day, an art teacher there, and right now. But as far as pursuing my own art, the way my biggest influence was when I was in college. I was junior year abroad, and they had just fresh flowers everywhere. And so I sort of got into the idea of painting flowers, and then also around that time I was introduced to Georgia O'Keeffe, and how she, earlier in her career, she did the flowers and she blew them up on her canvas. So rather than just doing some flowers in a vase, I would blow up the flowers on my canvas too, and sort of looking at the intricate parts of the flowers, and so that was sort of fun. And then to not just do flowers, like Georgia O'Keeffe moved on from her flower period. I also do nautical things, minerals, nautical, and I sort of sometimes do collages of things, but I'm always blowing them up, sort of getting into the nitty-gritty details. And then I went to a few trade shows and stuff. I saw the butterflies under glass. Actually, Rhode Island School of Design is I first got exposure to that, because they have museums and stuff that had the butterflies under glass. And sort of fun, you get these glass encased butterflies, and you can really just look at them, and then I blow them up on my canvases as well. I like oil painting better than acrylics, because acrylics dry too fast, and I like that oil painting can go back into it and rework stuff. And I love back in the day I used turpentine, and it always smelled so terrible. I always had a window cracked open. That was always the drawback of oils, and now they have the odorless turpentine. It's like a godsend to an oil painter. And I do also do ceramics. I teach ceramics, and I also work on the puddles. I'm also teaching classes in ceramics as well. But basically, oil painting is sort of the love of my life artistically. The difference between abstract artist and an artist that's actually painting a specific thing is that I always wondered that question with abstract artists: how do you know when you're done? I know when I'm done is that when I sort of do, let's say I'm doing the flower, I'll do one petal at a time, and then I'll work on the background, and then if I'm doing the other thing I just started is doing pet portraits, and so painting portraits of people's pets, and I will start with the face, and then the paws, and then the hind legs, and then the background, so I know I'm done when I feel like I've finished rendering the paint, the picture. I think my use of color really, I will be attracted to objects of bright colors. So if I was doing, painting a flower, I'll be excited about the purples and the pinks or whatever of the flower, and then I will try to really create that color on my canvas. I consider sort of the fun part of painting is trying to make that color. What do I have to do to make that color? Oh, this flower, that purple needs a little more red in it or a little more blue in it, and I really try to zing right in and create that color. If there's right now I'm working on a poppy painting, a painting of a poppy, and there are so many greens. It's almost going to be the death of me trying to do all these greens, all these different leaves. But it's sort of a challenge that I try to rise to and recreate it. And I say, okay, if I only do 1 square inch of this painting today and my working on it, so be it. And then it'll just take longer to finish, but ultimately I will finish it. So I think it's my eye, I love seeing, like when we go on vacation, I always go to botanical gardens. I love seeing the different flowers. So I'm just attracted to different bright colors, and then I render them on my canvas as I see them. You know, everybody has some type of a calling or a skill set or something that is really their strength. And so, you know, if I see somebody has like really strength in like painting or sculpture or something, I would encourage them. I think the seeing things and then wanting to render it or you know, that's sort of like I like to think that I have an artist's eye, and that sort of lends itself to photography. Like I go on vacation, I don't have any real need to paint like some artists do, but I have a great need to photograph it, to really make wonderful capture with just that moment on the photograph. And so there's some kids, to be frank, that aren't that interested in art, and we just try to coax them along and give them encouragement. If they really do something fabulous, you know, really point that out to them and get them to have a little bit more of an appreciation. And there's other kids that just love art, and you almost don't need to do anything because they're just rolling along and loving it on their own. So this first painting is a painting of my cat Ginger. And the little secret of this painting is it's actually 2 photographs in one. I just absolutely loved the face of one, but the body was too foreshortened. She was probably like sitting like forward like this, and so then the body is actually from another, which I didn't like the face as much. So I had quite a bit of artistic rendering, trying to get the proportions right and everything. And then another thing is I had some advice from a friend that when you focus in on, she actually created a business with horses, and she does these huge paneled paintings of horses, or commissions and everything. And she says that you want to focus on the pet, on the animal. So that background on the bottom, it was actually a runner, it's a table runner, and it was more distinct. And so I blurred it all around just to make it just sort of a dreamier sort of thing, so that you focus right in on the cat. So this was one of my more frustrating, in the sense that I found out that stripes are very hard to do. You try to tape it off, and you think you got the tape down nice and tight, and it bleeds through a little bit. So I just sort of they're 2 pairs, a red pair and a green pair, and the pairs are sort of floating in space with the stripes, just for something. I was just trying to do something a little different. A lot of times when I focus in on an object, I don't have a background because they're just sitting on my windowsill or something. So I create a background, and so I just sort of thought it'd be sort of fun to try to create, you know, the pairs very realistically, rendering them exactly the way they look, and then sort of throw, I don't know, sort of a, you know, could be like the wallpaper of a house wall or something. But that's the sort of the little inside secret of that, is I hated doing the stripes. And this is one of the butterflies that I was just talking about earlier that's under glass, and it was a black butterfly with all those stripes. And then I created the sky from a photograph that I had of something else, and then I just copied that sky. I wouldn't really have been able to create that sky with that much detail in my own head, I don't think. So it was much easier to copy one that I sort of had in front of me. And one of the things that is also another funny thing about when you do real flowers is they die. So I render it, you know, and it was a bloom just in that state, and I really had to make sure that on the drawing part, that I had every one of those little curls and stuff because then eventually it's going to change. It's going to like wilt a little bit more and stuff. And the color-wise, though, it's pretty stunning. And then that background is actually one of those little flip tables, sort of like the fake grain of a flip table. So that's what I put in that's what that background is.
I've been working on this fire theme for quite a while. It just has become, has a life of its own in a way, because first I was doing things like fire hydrants and fire safety things, and then there was a house in my neighborhood that burned, and I took pictures of it, and then, you know, it was a long time before it started, the roof was taken off and they started rebuilding it. And I took pictures of it, and then I started painting pictures of it. And then another house that when I babysit my grandson, I drive through Belmont, and there was another house that was already burnt. It had burnt quite a while ago, and it was just there. And I took pictures of that, and then on my way home that particular day, it was being torn down. And so I took pictures of that, and then I have also sort of documented how the repair has been going for that house. And then I also have painted pictures of fire that's pleasant fire. And it's sort of taken on a metaphor for me, because like life is supposed to be safe and fun, and we have safety things that are supposed to keep us safe, but still damage can happen. And then the repair and recovery from damage, whatever kind of damage it might be, physical or emotional or whatever, the repair can be long and complicated, and there's internal work and external work. And so it's become something that's been really passionate for me. I feel like it speaks to something in our society today that, we hear of people who have been hurt, and, years later they come forward and get help or speak about it, I learned to draw. I've always liked to draw. My sisters and I would always draw together, and my grandmother was an artist. She lived in Philadelphia, and though I didn't see her that often, I did get encouragement from her, and I enjoyed looking at her work. So I haven't gone to school for art, though my high school art teachers in Canton were very good and very helpful. It was really great program they had there. And then I have gotten help from some other watercolorists along the way, just some tips here and there. And I guess it's called self-taught or something, but I do consider it a gift that I have enjoyed and use. I did, going to school, I did like art a lot. English and writing were not a thing that I enjoyed until in college. I enjoyed writing scripts for puppet shows and dramas and stuff like that, and so I started to enjoy communicating with words. And I did go to Emerson College and majored in writing and publishing. So I did get my master's there. So I do enjoy writing. I'd say I don't like a lot of words. And I even don't like to read a lot of words. I like concise. This is just a beautiful fireplace up in New Hampshire at my sister's condo. And I wanted to show how fire, when it's controlled and when it's contained, it's enjoyable. We use it to celebrate, we use it for ambiance, and we use it for good things. We need it, and I guess we could say we have to survive with it. Fire equipment, and when you start looking around, practically every room, especially in a public building, there's going to be something related to fire. And this particular painting was from Braintree train station. And I thought it was funny that the firebox says out of service, call 911, because I guess fireboxes are being put out of business. We have a different way of reporting fire, but it's still a reminder of safety. And also the reflection in that painting, there's a fire truck there, because there was an emergency going on at the time when I was there at the station. I have found it fascinating, just how much fire safety and fire codes, visiting fire stations even, so it's an important part of living with fire. This is a house in Belmont where it was like that. I drove by it many times with the roof burnt out, and you know, I didn't really, I took pictures of it, and then one day on my way home it was being torn down, so I stopped and took some more pictures of it being burned down. And then as it was going to be rebuilt, which you'll see in a minute, but the process to me was really fascinating. And then I did Google it and found information about this house and when it burned. And there was someone who died in that fire, so that was pretty troubling to read that. But it is the truth that fire, when it's not contained, can cause damage and great physical harm, emotional harm. It can be just a devastating thing. And so here's the house in the beginning of its rebuild phase. I do have other paintings of it further along, and I don't think it's quite finished yet. It's almost finished. It has landscaping now and a roof and windows and everything else, but there's a few things I think they're still working on. So I found it fascinating just to see the amazing process it is. Plus, it's a hard hat area, so it's still a dangerous place. And I don't think that in this particular house that there are any pictures of dumpsters, but in another house that I've painted, there were many dumpsters, probably 4 or 5 dumpsters that took away the debris. And I thought about that in a metaphorical way, like when there's emotional damage or repair that needs to be done, we have to get rid of the old, unuseful, damaged stuff. And I've actually talked about it as the dumpster being like a therapist, like to dump our, you know, whatever, our I don't know what word to use, but to dump it. It's not going to serve us anymore. We need to do something with it. We have to have it removed. So I've found it fascinating to see, I guess, the metaphor of it. I feel like now in our society that art is something that's really healing and a way to process difficult stuff sometimes. I do have connections to Quincy. My father was Quincy Woolworths manager for many years, long ago, and I have come to Quincy many times. I live on the North Shore now, but I do still have a lot of connections to the South Shore, and it's a little, I get lost now because things don't look the same, but it's still Quincy. I like it.
Hi, I'm Martha Kemp. I'm a recently retired art teacher and a painter, and I have 4 children and a wonderful husband, and I live in Milton. And I've been trying to work on painting since I retired just 2 years ago. Before I became an art teacher, I was always interested in art. Even I think some of my earliest memories are from kindergarten, drawing chalk stars on the kindergarten floor because I could do it, and for a game in the classroom, and getting a nice new box of my own jumbo crayons, 8 in a box. So I kind of remember that a lot. So that was like the earliest part. But I was always interested in art, and I think my greatest influences came junior high and then high school. One of the things that inspired me the most, I think, was in high school when my high school art teacher suggested that I apply for a scholarship program after school at the Museum of Fine Arts. And so I did, and I was accepted, and it was great because 3 afternoons a week I'd get on the trolley and go to the Museum of Fine Arts, and I would go meet with other public school students in the basement studios, and we would work for like hours, and then they'd bring us upstairs into the studio, and sometimes we would have lectures, but mostly it was actual hands-on studio work in the galleries. And that really inspired me a lot. As an art teacher, in your training and what you have to do to expose the kids to a lot of different types of artwork, and so your background has to be, multifaceted. And as I was teaching all those years, I was dabbling in a lot of different things because you have to expose them to printmaking, working with clay, drawing, painting, all different kinds of media. So when I retired, I decided what I really, really, really wanted to do was to concentrate on one thing at a time, and sort of step up my game in each of the passions that I have. So watercolor was something that I had struggled with, because a lot of people have a bit of control issues with it, and I love the look of watercolors, and I wanted to try to do that because I was spending a lot of time down along the South Shore, along the seashore, and it was I just love nature. It's very inspiring to me, and when I paint, I really try to capture the light and how it falls on different forms. I'm always interested in architectural forms as well, so I like that combination kind of interesting architecture and nature. I have a lot of artists that have been famous artists that I admire, who I've been traveling around the world trying to see the originals, and I'm having a lot of fun doing that. Depends on which thing I was working on. When I was working in etchings a lot, I was looking a lot at Goya, so I was really happy to go to Spain and see a lot of that. When I was looking at Impressionism is one of the styles that I enjoy. I like the color and the freshness of the Impressionist painters. And so I was really thrilled to go to Monet's garden and go there and paint after visiting that. So that was a lot of fun too. But locally, like the watercolors of Sargent, I thought are just stunning. And they always have that sparkle that you look for in a watercolor. And that's something that's hard to keep. And a lot of times when I was teaching, I would teach the students, don't kill it, because sometimes you can overdo. And sometimes with watercolors, you have to really know when to stop, because it's very easy to muddy the waters, shall we say. As I said, nature, we love nature. My family has been to many of the national parks in our own country. We're planning one for California later on this year, and we're all looking forward to visiting a couple more parks that we've never been to. But I often will take photos. If I don't have time, I'll take photos and then work from my photos when I get home. And each one is so unique, like the towering pines of Acadia. And then you go out to Utah and you have the red rocks and the arches, and it's just fabulous. And Yellowstone had so many different amazing attributes that I just found it awe-inspiring. And I have done a lot of national park work, and I hope to do more. I actually was looking into doing a residency, and I was accepted to do 2 of them last year, and I just couldn't do it. So it didn't work out, but hopefully I'll be able to do that in the near future. The national parks just speak to me so much, beyond just the beauty. It's almost a spiritual thing, and it can give you such peace and joy. It's almost like meditating. And you can really enjoy it yourself and with whoever you're with and your families. And it's nice to visit these places that have been preserved, because they are in danger. And we're very fortunate that we've saved as much as we have. And we need to be caretakers of the parks. It's just such great resources for all kinds of artists, writers, musicians, painters. It's really terrific. And for me to see, the power of nature, or the beauty or the quiet of nature, and how I interpret it with my paints is something I really enjoy doing. When I'm painting it, I'm really enjoying it, and I get in the zone, and I might paint for days and days and really enjoy it. This painting is called Beach Grass, and I painted this one down in Hull, along Hull, Massachusetts, along Nantasket Beach. If you're familiar with Hull, it's down near the Alphabet Streets. And I was struck by the play of light and shadow along the coastline there with the fence in particular. And I'm always interested in architectural things as well as natural things, so it kind of gives you a little bit of a focus there as the fence leads your eye up into the painting and brings you to those the little cottages in the back there. It kind of caught my eye, and I thought that was going to be fun and a bit of a challenge to kind of get the shadows the way I wanted. So I kind of, each painting that I do, it's almost like a discovery process, you know. I'm trying to challenge myself to get better at particular things so that they come more easily. But everything doesn't go as you plan, and this is what I always used to tell my students: you have to pay attention to what's happening in front of you on the canvas, because sometimes accidents happen, and sometimes they're happy accidents. And if you pay attention, you can learn from your accidents and then control them and make them happen on purpose at a later date. So that was the challenge there. This painting is called Reflections, and this was a challenge that I set out for myself to try to really capture the freshness of the reflections underneath the boats and the docks. This was taken from on site at Hingham Harbor. That's where that was, if you know where that is. So I had some fun with that. I enjoyed that. I don't use white paint when I paint with watercolors. I think sometimes people say that you're a purist when you don't use white paint if you're a watercolor artist. I don't know if that's true, but I don't paint using white because it tends to make the paint more opaque, and I try to keep it as transparent as I can. I do use mastic sometimes to save some whites, and then you rub it off afterwards, and that's kind of helpful, especially when I work something for a while. If I block out white areas ahead of time, I can preserve them and then go back in and touch them up after and keep it lighter. This painting is, I called this one The Rocks at Cohasset. That's where the setting for this painting was. And I really like the color of the rocks. That's what drew me to this scene. And the contrasting color of the kind of reddish orange and the blue. I teach my students complementary colors, you know, so I kind of really like that combination there, and I thought it was an interesting thing to do to up my game on texture. I really wanted to get better at showing texture in watercolor, because I was used to painting in oils, and I love painting in oils, and I'm going to be doing that soon. That's what I'm shifting over to oils again. But when you paint in acrylics or oils, the paint is much, much thicker, and the texture is rich and it's physical. You know, you can actually feel it, and you can see it lift off the canvas. It has real thickness, you know. But in watercolor, it's very thin, transparent layers. So you have to create the illusion of the texture. And that's what I was trying to do with the rocks. This is actually not a watercolor. This is actually an acrylic painting that was done at a very special event that they have every year in Hull called Joe's is the name of the restaurant. That's where it's held. It's actually on the peninsula that goes out to Pemberton Pier. People are familiar with that. There's a little restaurant called Joe's, and a lot of the members of the Hull Artists Group, which I'm a member of, will show up, set up their easels and all over the beach there, wherever they want, and have a great 2-day weekend of plein air painting. And that's what that was from. I liked the blending of the colors in the sky and in the water. I liked how I noticed how it changed from like the blue to the green, and you know, the gradations of color in the sky is kind of nice. So I was happy to do that. I was struggling with the boats because, believe it or not, before I even started all these nautical type beach pictures. I really hadn't painted many boats in my life. So it was kind of like I had to learn about boats a little bit, but no matter what you paint, it's forms and it's color and it's how the light hits it. So no matter what it is, just think of it as forms and you're well on your way. As you go out through all the different seasons of the year, nature is a wonderful thing to enjoy, and I hope it causes people to pause and to remember perhaps times when they were at some of these spots, and to look a little bit more closely the next time they're out along our seashore.